The terminal buzzed with the rhythm of an early morning crowd. Between the sea of business suits and restless toddlers, two young travelers stood out, not for their noise or confusion, but because they carried themselves with an unexpected calm. Caleb Morgan, 17, had one hand in his pocket, the other casually holding his boarding pass. His earbuds dangled from his collar like afterthoughts. His sister, Simone, 19, balanced a tablet against her arm and clutched a compact gift bag. Both wore sleek navy tracksuits, elegant, subtle, and clean. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. And yet, their presence stirred quiet ripples through the first-class boarding line. From her position near the aircraft entrance, head flight attendant Margaret Steele spotted them immediately. She leaned toward her junior colleague and whispered without looking directly at them, "They're in the wrong line." Her tone wasn't curious. It was confident. Certain. Caleb and Simone stepped forward with the calm of people used to being doubted. Caleb smiled and nodded at the crew. "Morning." Simone offered a polite, level glance. "Seats 2A and 2B." Margaret raised her hand sharply, halting them with the flat of her palm like a traffic officer. "Hold up. This section is for first-class passengers." Simone held out their passes. "We know. That's us." Margaret squinted, her lips pressed in suspicion. She scanned the tickets twice, even though the names, seats, and flight codes matched perfectly. "Just wait here," she said, turning abruptly and disappearing into the cabin. Simone glanced at her brother. "Here we go." Caleb shrugged, unfazed. At least she didn't say we were in the wrong airport. This wasn't new. Not for them. Not in restaurants with white tablecloths, not in hotel lobbies with chandeliers, not in concert VIP lines. They always had the credentials. What they lacked, apparently, was the expected look. Margaret returned, her expression blank. "You may proceed. Just don't touch any of the galley equipment," she added, with a tight smile. "I noticed you looking a little too close to the espresso unit." "I didn't touch anything," Caleb said, blinking. "I was reading the sign." "Exactly," Margaret replied, the corners of her mouth twitching. "It's not for guests." The moment landed with the weight of absurdity. Simone hadn't seen Caleb move an inch. But Margaret brushed past them, murmuring something about protocol. They reached their seats, second row, window, and aisle. Simone exhaled and sat upright, her shoulders firm. Caleb collapsed into his seat, fishing through his carry-on until he found a gift bag with cartoon animals. Inside was a set of colored pencils and a sketchbook for their younger brother's birthday. Margaret reappeared, halting at the side of the bag. "This isn't a field trip," she said with a sugary sneer. "I suggest you keep personal items tucked away." Simone's voice was cool. "It's a gift. We'll store it once we settle in." "I'll make a note," Margaret said, and disappeared again. Across the aisle, a man in a tailored suit muttered something to his neighbor. The word, entitled, floated back toward Simone. She said nothing. Years of practice taught her how silence could be stronger than rebuttal. But inside, something settled, cold and solid. A younger attendant named Haley approached, offering drinks. When she got to Simone, she smiled gently. "Still water?" Simone nodded. "Thank you." But before Haley could pour, Margaret swept in again. "No drinks until cruising altitude." I said no," Margaret snapped. Haley recoiled, embarrassed. Caleb leaned over and whispered, "Strike 3." Other passengers had begun to notice. Some glanced up with curiosity. Others quietly turned away. Simone stared ahead, her screen glowing but unread. The cabin settled. The doors closed. Passengers adjusted pillows, scrolled on phones, murmured about meeting agendas and weekend plans. Caleb pulled his hoodie over his head and sank deeper into his seat. Simone didn't blink. Then came Margaret's voice, slicing through the quiet. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 221 to Los Angeles. A gentle reminder, this premium cabin is reserved for travelers seeking a refined experience. Kindly refrain from any behavior that disrupts the tranquility of our first-class service." Though phrased generally, the statement had direction. Several heads turned, some subtle, others not. Caleb sighed. Translation: "Sit down and know your place." "Don't let her bait you," Simone murmured. But Margaret wasn't finished. From behind the curtain, she filmed a short video on her phone. Her voice was hushed but pointed. "Flying first today. Standards have dropped. You never know who you'll find up here anymore," she said, panning toward the cabin where the backs of Caleb and Simone's heads were just visible. She uploaded the clip with a snide caption, "When first class becomes a raffle prize." Simone's tablet buzzed. A friend had seen the video. It was already spreading across a closed airline industry group. Simone saved the post and forwarded it to their father. She filmed us, she said quietly. Caleb's eyes darkened. That's harassment. Simone's voice was razor-thin. It's documentation now. Margaret continued her charade. She returned with a tray but offered Caleb and Simone only plain water. We're out of sparkling, she lied. Behind them, the suited man watched silently. As Margaret moved on, her steps were crisp. She wore power like perfume, asserting control not with volume, but with precision. But what she didn't realize was this. Simone had started recording. Caleb was taking notes. Every slight, every denial, every look, they weren't reacting anymore. They were gathering evidence. The lights dimmed. The engines hummed. Just before takeoff, Margaret tapped her tablet and reassigned their seats quietly, mid-flight, to row 9, near the lavatory. A technicality. Still premium, but barely. Less comfort. More noise. She didn't tell them right away. She wanted it to sting. And it would. As beverage service began, Caleb and Simone remained seated in row 2, unaware that the seats printed on their tickets had been quietly rescinded. Margaret hovered nearby, pretending to organize service trays. Her tablet displayed the new seat assignments. Row 9, seats C and D, close enough to justify, far enough to punish. Eventually, she approached with another crew member, a young technician carrying a scanner. Apologies, Margaret said sweetly. We've had a small system glitch. Just need to verify your boarding details. Simone's brow furrowed. There's a problem with our tickets? Not exactly, she replied, her voice breezy. Your names were flagged during takeoff. Probably nothing. Caleb handed over his phone. Simone followed. The technician scanned both passes. Valid, he confirmed. Paid in full. No issues. Margaret leaned in, pretending to examine his screen. Strange, she murmured. Because it shows you're now in row 9. Simone stared. Mid-flight seat changes for no reason? It happens sometimes, Margaret said. System overrides. Overrides what exactly? Caleb asked. Status codes, she offered vaguely. Let's not hold up service. We'll help you get settled in your new seats. The businessman in 3A frowned. An older woman in 1C lowered her newspaper. Simone stood slowly. Just to clarify, she said, her voice calm. Our seats were scanned. Confirmed. But now you're saying a mysterious system reassigned us for no documented reason? That's correct, Margaret replied. Caleb rose too, this time without hiding his frustration. This is ridiculous. You're doing this on purpose. Margaret blinked. Sir, that's a serious accusation. So is racial targeting, Simone added coolly. That's not what this is, Margaret said, the edge in her voice now harder to hide. Then tell us what it is, Caleb pressed. Margaret scanned the rows. Passengers were now clearly watching. She motioned toward the galley. Let's continue this away from others. You already made it public, Simone replied. They followed her past silent onlookers. When they reached row 9, Caleb paused. One tray table was broken. The nearby lavatory reeked of industrial cleaner. You're relocating us here? Simone asked. Next to the restroom, broken seat and all? It's still first class, Margaret said curtly. On paper, Caleb muttered. He turned to his sister. Start recording. Without a word, Simone lifted her tablet. A soft red light blinked in the corner. What are you doing? Margaret snapped. Protecting our rights, Caleb answered. If this is just a system error, you won't mind it being documented. Margaret's face hardened. You're being difficult. No, Simone said evenly. We're being watched. And now, so are you. Back at the front, Margaret retreated into the galley. Furious, she tapped into the crew dashboard. She disabled service to row 9. No drinks, no meal options, no extras. A quiet erasure. She knew no one would notice. No one ever looked too closely when the target wasn't someone they expected to matter. But Simone wasn't done watching. She began cataloging timestamps. Caleb jotted every denial. They weren't just collecting proof. They were building a timeline. An hour passed. Warm towels arrived for most passengers. Sparkling drinks were offered to rows 1 through 8. Nothing for row 9. Caleb pressed the call button. No answer. 10 minutes later, Simone pressed it again. Still nothing. A young attendant named Lacey passed nearby. Caleb caught her eye. Excuse me, could we get some water? Of course, she said, startled. Before she could move, Margaret stepped in like a shadow. They're fine, she said sharply. Already checked on them. But, after turbulence, Margaret lied. There was no turbulence. Lacey nodded awkwardly and walked away. Simone whispered, She's trying to make us invisible. Caleb nodded. She wants the cabin to forget we exist. Margaret wasn't satisfied with isolation. She wanted alienation. She stopped beside a passenger in row 6, leaned down, and whispered, "Just so you're aware, those two in row 9 have caused some issues on previous flights. Nothing confirmed, but keep an eye on your belongings." The man frowned. "Issues? Disruptive behavior," she said solemnly. "Refusal to follow instructions. Just a heads up." She repeated the tactic twice more. Quiet implications. No accusations. Just enough to plant doubt. By the time Simone reached for the shared armrest and brushed against the man next to her, he recoiled slightly, pulling his phone closer. They were no longer passengers. They were suspects. Simone murmured, "She's rewriting who we are. She sees problems, not people," Caleb said. Then came another announcement. Margaret stood with the PA mic in hand, her voice crisp and cutting. "We'd like to remind all passengers in our premium cabin that this area is reserved for adult travelers seeking a refined experience. Unaccompanied minors must refrain from disruptive behavior or attempting to access amenities not included with their booking." The blow landed like a slap. Heads turned. A few smirked. One man chuckled. Simone's hands trembled slightly, but her face remained unreadable. Margaret passed by moments later with drinks. As she leaned near, she muttered, "First class doesn't come with babysitting." Caleb stared at her, unmoved. "You think this is funny? Reality's refreshing," she said. Simone reached into her bag. She opened a folder on her tablet, one she'd created during a summer internship. It was called Escalation Protocol, Passenger Misconduct, Internal Use Only. Caleb leaned closer. "What is that? A kill switch?" She forwarded a draft message. Subject, "In-flight harassment, Flight 221. She attached the recordings. The reassignment. The audio of Margaret's veiled threats. "I just sent it to Dad's company line," she said. "No one filters that inbox." "You think he'll respond?" "He doesn't need to. He just needs to see it." 10 minutes passed. Margaret returned to their row. She cleared her throat. "We're conducting a routine verification. Passengers Johnson, Baby, and Maria Ben, please step forward." Simone blinked. She didn't just. She did, Caleb confirmed. He stood. "It's Caleb Morgan. Her name is Simone Morgan. Not Baby, not Maria." Margaret offered a tight smile. "My mistake. Must be a system error." Then she leaned into her shoulder radio. "Requesting gate security standby. 2 minors exhibiting noncompliance. Possible forged manifest entries." Simone's voice was ice. "She's trying to get us flagged." Caleb said nothing. He didn't need to. Everyone was watching now. Margaret turned back. "Return to your seats." "You made the scene," Simone said. "We just happened to be in it." They sat, but Simone opened a secure internal app. She uploaded every log. Margaret walked away with the mic again. "All cabin incidents are being handled," she said over the speaker. "Assistants will meet us at the gate." A few passengers whispered. Others looked uneasy. Simone hit one last button. Escalation confirmed. Oversight triggered. At the front of the cabin, Margaret's tablet vibrated. She tapped it casually, then froze. Across the top, live oversight review in progress. Compliance observer on board. She opened the dashboard. Simone Morgan. Caleb Morgan. Status, cleared. Full access. Crew watch active. Margaret's throat went dry. From the cockpit, a voice came through her headset. "Margaret, we're seeing a level 1 audit ping. Did you initiate a report?" "Yes," she stammered. "Minor. Then why is the airline owner's name attached?" Margaret couldn't answer. Caleb stood, this time with confidence. From his jacket, he pulled a lanyard. A silver badge gleamed. Executive Access, Operations Oversight Division. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Simone remained seated, her screen still glowing. Caleb spoke clearly. "This flight is under live review. All actions are being logged and audited, including the forged incident report and service inconsistencies." The older woman in row 1 stood. "They've been targeted since boarding. I've seen enough." Even the young attendant, Lacey, stepped forward. "She told us not to assist them," she admitted. "We didn't know how far it had gone." Simone sent one final message. Within minutes, the captain himself emerged. "Mr. Morgan?" he said. "Yes," Caleb replied. "The flag was received?" "It was. We've been instructed to hold the cabin for senior review." 10 minutes later, a man in a Navy suit boarded from the executive ramp. He didn't need a badge. Everyone knew who he was. Thomas Morgan, CEO, Caleb and Simone's father. His voice was quiet, measured. "Margaret," he said, "do you know who you've been harassing?" Her lips trembled. I didn't know." "No, you didn't care to know." He turned to the captain. "Lock the manifest. No edits. Full audit." Then to Simone and Caleb. "You handled this with grace. I'm proud of you both." To Margaret. "You are relieved of duty, pending disciplinary review. Your access is revoked. Your actions will be used in training as an example of what never to do again." As she was escorted off, Caleb and Simone remained seated, unshaken. The captain made an announcement. "Please be advised that an internal compliance review is underway. Thank you for your cooperation." Passengers sat in stunned silence. Simone turned to Caleb. "You think they'll remember this flight?" Caleb smiled faintly. "They'll remember who really had power." And they would. Not because Simone and Caleb raised their voices, but because they stayed composed while the system tried to erase them and recorded every second of it. The end.